What's up, Zach here, and today I've got the all-new 361 Degrees Team Joker. Thanks, 361 Degrees, for having me a pair of these to check out. However, this video is not sponsored, and as always, all opinions, good, bad, and indifferent, are all my own. Now, starting off in the uppers, the Team Joker, to me, it almost looks a little bit like some Jordan shoes with, the synthetic leather going over the toe box, and on the sides, you get the meshing, the TPU woven mesh on the sides of that caging, which allows the breathability, and you get the paneling that goes over the top that provides a lot of the containment. And honestly, the materials in these ones and how they're laid out, it really accomplish that goal better than a lot of other shoes. As you go into the rear foot on both sides, you go into this shiny, rough textured material here in the rear foot on both sides. Now, as you can hear, it's hard underneath there. I cut this open, and the heel counter, the internal one, actually goes all the way around to this on both sides. So it is a really big heel counter, and you also get an external heel counter that complements that. So even though the shoe gets a little more narrow in the midfoot, it's honestly a little bit kind of easier to move around. It still retains a ton of containment because, man, the heel counter just is not going anywhere. The padding back there, you get a ton of it, especially on both sides of your Achilles tendon, right, like right around your ankle bones. That is absolutely fantastic in terms of getting locked into the shoe. I found with these things, interestingly enough, before I get to the heel slippage, you see you have 3 lace eyelets here, the most proximal aspect, but there's only 2 openings on the inside, which means that 2 of those outer eyelets share 1 hole on the inside. Just remember that it's not a problem with your batch when you get it. You just have to go in there and just find the outer hole from the inside. It's a shared hole, almost like in some tennis rackets when you string them. And as you go into the rest of the lace line, it's kind of like hybrid, integrated cuff eyelets. They are then backed on the inside though. So like I said, you get a really strong tie down on these. What I noticed is if I just used the highest eyelet, that peak eyelet, or the most proximal eyelet, heel slippage was like mild to moderate. If I actually used a runner's knot in these things, and I was able to crank down all that padding in the rear foot because, like I said, the rear foot is a little bit more like stout, right? A little more stiff. That's when heel slippage went from none to mild. Now, once it breaks in, it's gonna get better with just using, right, like 1 eyelet, not using the runner's knot. But I would say, especially starting off with them, use the runner's knot. That way you're pulling all of that paneling over your ankle, getting a much better lockdown. That's if you have an orthotic or not. These shoes, to me, meant to have a runner's knot in them. Now, if you look at these things on the breathability test, this was interesting. I'm also doing these a little bit different now, where I'm taking simultaneous readings from the peak temperature as well as the center of the shoe. So the readings are gonna start looking different from now on. It's actually making all the shoes seem like they're heating up lower. I'm gonna try to go in and do previous shoes that are still available again when I get a second and put it in the 2025 basketball shoe guide that's available for download so that you can kind of get a more accurate representation. But like I said, for the next few shoes, I'll be prefacing kind of what that reading means, because it might be a little bit harder to compare to previous shoes now. So like I said, because the readings are, like I said, I think a little bit more accurate because my new thermal imaging camera can just get multiple pictures of the shoe at the same time, and I'm able to average all of them. I feel like that gives a little bit of a better indication of the actual breathability of the shoe. So the test is getting better. It's just the numbers are gonna look a little different. Now these ones heated up 107.9 degrees. The Adazero SL was 97 degrees, right? The BioSpeed BB, which I don't even know if the review's out yet, was only 77 degrees, right? So I mean, it is a little bit more than some others, but if you look at where it's coming out, the size of the shoe, I mean, they're breathing really well. Look at the breathability mapping of these things too. Fog is blowing out of both sides of these shoes really, really well. Like I said, the tongue is padded enough proximally. I didn't really have any lace irritation really, unless I used the most back eyelet and really cranked it with the runners on. Anything else wasn't that bad. And like I said, you get a lot of breathability through the tongue. So the breathability is not terrible by any means. I would just say if something's gonna hold on to heat, it's gonna be the synthetics on the top. Looking at the upper durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper. So the synthetic really does a good job. That synthetic leather piece really just scuffs it. I mean, it takes the color off, but I mean, it just scuffs it. The TPU on the side, that TPU in textile does really well too. The foam obviously just gets pummeled. So I'd say if you're a dragger or slider, the thing is you're gonna pummel through the foam first. So get ready for it to look a little bit weird, but I was really kind of surprised at how good the synthetic is. So if you're just a true toe dragger, I think you'll be okay. If you go on the medial side, like I said, you might start to scuff that foam up. All right, but getting into the midsole teardown for a supposed team shoe, you do get a top-loaded shank, which is double thickness. That's awesome. And an entire bed of CO2 infused thermoplastic foam. It feels pretty dense, feels responsive, really lively. If you look at it on the bounce height test, got 40 centimeters in the rear foot, 43 in the forefoot. I mean, this stuff is responsive. It feels responsive underfoot. And to me, it's not just the midsole, like bottom of foot setup in these, it's the fact that you get a really stout external and internal heel counter that goes pretty far into the shoe. So the rear foot stays really stable and really responsive, and like you know, the rear foot's not kind of slogging you down, and it's not causing containment issues. Plus the rest of the shoe with that top-loaded shank and the thermoplastic foam is really, really responsive underfoot. Plus the outsole, there's some unique aspects of the outsole too that I think make these shoes feel really fast, right, and really kind of bounding. So we'll talk about that in the outsole section. But suffice to say, for, like I said, quote unquote team shoe, to me, this midsole is as good as it gets. All right, but getting into the outsole tread, you see these three circular pods in the forefoot, and then, you know, it kind of is rounded off here in the rear foot. Now, all four, I'll call this in the rear foot a pod. All four of these pods jut out a little bit, right? So it's not a completely flat midsole, and you definitely feel that on foot. The interesting thing is I mean, kudos to their manufacturing, because it doesn't feel wobbly, right? It doesn't feel like a wobble board underneath of your foot. You definitely feel that there's rises underneath them, and it's really subtle, but you'll feel it. But the thing is like, in terms of like containment, it's fine, right? I mean, the lateral flange made of outsole rubber, it's really sturdy. The shoe, like I said, does get a little bit narrow there in the midfoot, not in an uncomfortable way, but it's just, you know, they cut out a lot of the shoe in the midfoot to cut weight down. But if you're looking for like a flat tread pattern, this is not it. This is much more, you know, it's kind of more easy to shift side to side. It's almost like those rolled rubber patterns on some shoes, like on some of the Puma Mellow shoes, to get easier transition step, whereas this one kind of takes that to another level, almost like rolled plantar rubber. So it's definitely a different feeling. Some people are gonna like it, some people maybe not, but like I said, to me, it's very easy to transition step. It's very easy to get coast to coast on them. And the containment was much better than I thought it was gonna be. When we get into the fit, we'll talk about the degrees of eversion it allows, and that was also a pretty big surprise. Look at this thing on the grip test ramp, doesn't slip till 43 degrees, and honestly, there's not a ton of contact. So it's the rubber compound, that static grip. And dynamic grip, they don't really pick up dust either. I mean, even on my core here, not really any issues with slippage at all. And I thought I was gonna be slipping and sliding these like crazy, because said you're not getting a lot of surface area contact. That dynamic grip I thought was gonna suffer a little bit, and it really didn't. And look at these things on the speed ratio. They come in at a 2.74, shank score of 0.3, brings it up to a 3.04. That's where a lot of fast running shoes get on the speed ratio. And I think they deserve every decimal point of that. I mean, they are quick shoes. And even though they're not a feather light shoe like the Li-Ning Gamma, they still get from step to step so easily. These remind me of a Li-Ning Gamma or the Li-Ning Ultralight, but more like plush, right? Like the upper is a little bit more plush, and you know, I guess the word I could use sometimes is luxurious. That's what these remind me of. And honestly, in like the Team Joker shoe, I can't believe you're getting it in this shoe. I look at this thing on the outsole durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, and basically the burr just cleans off that micro texture on there. These do actually have a really nice micro texture on them, you know, which each line of tread is actually stamped individually. So it really only cleans that off. Durometer comes in at 18.2, so not terrible. I would say on outdoor courts, because you know, they roll so easily, and kind of the design of them allows for a little less friction, right? I think they're actually pretty darn good outdoor shoes just because of that, right? You know, like you might not wear through them as fast because not a lot of rubber is contacting the ground, and when it does, it's transitioning really easily. So the shoe itself, just like the ergonomics of the shoe, kind of help with durability. So yeah, all around, it's different, it's unique, but I think it still gets the job done. All right, but getting into the fit of the Team Joker, number one, they do have a 14-degree in-flare, so these things are in-flaring pretty good. I think that's one of the other reasons why they feel a little bit more speedy. You're getting a little bit of that from, you know, a little bit more of the inward deflection of the shoe. Now, these things do have a resting everted position of 1 degree. That only goes to 4 degrees everted with loading. And I thought it was gonna be so much more, like I said, because of those tread pods. Number one, I think, like I said, decent manufacturing, so they're not uneven. But number two, it's the heel counters, right? And the top-loaded shank is keeping the shoe pretty stable. So yeah, it does allow 3 degrees of eversion, which really isn't, you know, that's pretty middle of the road for a shoe that's trying not to sprain your ankle. Now, in terms of length, they come in at 28.8 centimeters, 9.5 centimeters of metatarsal width, 10.5 of toe box width, and then a toe box taper of 27 degrees. And so to me, these are kind of similar to the Joker one in that the shoe itself is generous, but the in-flare, I think, is what might catch some people and what, you know, might make them fit a little bit more snug in the shoe. These ones don't break in like the Joker ones, like the materials. So I'd say a narrow medium foot, I'd just go true to size on these things. A 2E, I'd probably be going up a half size on these things. A 4E, I'd probably be going up one size on these things, like I said, because of that in flare. In terms of patients in my office, I'd be recommending these for, it's people that need a shoe for going coast to coast, really protect the bottom of their foot, easy transition step. That's where I think these things shine the most. If you want consistent grip on indoor and outdoor courts, you also want to protect your feet from maybe some really unforgiving outdoor courts, I think this is kind of where you go, as long as you're not a big dragger or slider. If you want to fit an orthotic in a shoe, still retain a lot of that real performance, that real snap in a shoe, and I think these are fantastic. Like I said, they're such a flowing shoe. They just flow from step to step so easily, especially, like I said, going coast to coast or north to south. I was really surprised on their side-to-side abilities. So you can definitely still move side to side really well in terms of step backs, quick movements, like I said, because like they pop off the ground so easily, especially with the outsole tread. Like I said, you just gotta get used to the topography of the outsole. But in terms of a shoe that's just so easy to get up and down the court in while still retaining some more of that side-to-side ability, right, while not being an ankle spraining machine, it's nice to see. So yeah, I mean, I think these are gonna find their way into a lot of gym bags for sure. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you do wanna see what I'm talking about with the older sibling to the Team Joker, the 361 Joker 1, I'll leave that video linked up above. Make sure you subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.